Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today I have Boomer Anderson on the line. He's co-founder and CEO over at Troscriptions and CEO at Health Optimization Medicine in Practice. Boomer, welcome to the show.
Adam, I know I've been exchanging emails with you and your team for a long time, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, we finally got you on. We finally wrangled you in, Boomer. I'm in. I'm excited to get into what you're doing over at Troscriptions and also your nonprofit as well. So we'll do that and more. But to get us kicked off here, your mission. I like to start episodes like this. So at Mission Matters, our aim and our goal is to amplify stories. That's what we do. Boomer, what mission matters to you?
So our mission through our organizations is simplified as democratize enlightenment. Now, the second of those two words is a pretty obtuse word for most people. When we think of enlightenment, even though a lot of our team has advanced studies in Buddhist practices and even has spent time in a monastery, we think of enlightenment as kind of the formal definition, which is more separation of or freedom from the illusion of the self. But what does that really boil down to? Because again, that sort of is just a little bit less obtuse. But what does enlightenment actually boil down to? And it's presence. And so when I talk about presence, it's presence in each and every moment. And so this conversation with you is the only thing on my mind right now. And we want to democratize that, meaning making it available for people. And so that means removing obstacles in the way for enlightenment. And the particular vector that we operate in is health. Because if you think about it, if you're in pain, you're probably not present. If you're unable to focus, you're certainly not present. And if you can't sleep, it's certainly hard to be present. So when we like to think about it, our mission, we call it formally democratize enlightenment, but really we're talking about let's bring presence back.
How did you come up with this idea? Like, where'd this start from? I mean, obviously I see the term co-founder there. Like, where'd this start for you?
So it started really with Dr. Ted, who is our chief science officer, founder, and the guy who I met, and he kind of gave me the drug that allowed me to become a part of this company. But really what it started with was a couple of things. First, if you look at our healthcare system, it's very much disease management. I remember when I was in my 20s, Adam, I'm sure you have had this experience too. If you have brain fog and you're not feeling like 100%, or if you didn't sleep well last night, who do you go to? In our healthcare system, the answer is actually a question mark. But what we wanted to do was create a world where there's a new occupation, and that's a health manager. And that's what we did with Health Optimization Medicine in Practice. It's based on Dr. Ted's clinical framework that he's developed over decades working with politicians, actors, the like, all around the world. But it's really the first clinical practice that is focused purely on health. Now, why do we do that? It's because of that idea of presence. If you look at the world around right now, there's so many crazy things going on, but if we were just present or can sit down and have a conversation with people, think about how many conflicts that would resolve. Think about how much better we would treat people, and think about just how many sort of injustices in the world could be resolved by just being present for a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you've been on this path, I'm so curious, how do people respond to this? Like when you're talking to people, especially in business, because I feel like there might be a first inclination of like, wait, what? You don't expect it exactly, but then once you kind of get into it, it's like, wait a minute, what's your response when you normally like bring this to people?
You know, it's interesting because the initial inclination, especially if somebody read it on our website, they'd be like, wait, what? But let me kind of give a little bit of my backstory here, because I was in a very different industry in a past life. I worked in finance, investment banker. I worked in New York and in Singapore. And by the age of 30, I had done everything that I wanted to in finance. I had one of those sort of hockey stick or J-shaped curves that everybody dreams of when it comes to finance. But I looked around and sat next to a couple of guys who were doing the exact same thing I was doing at other banks. And they're 60 years old. And I told myself, look, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be 60 years old and doing the same thing. And so I submitted my resignation, which is crazy to do, because I walked away from one of those, the golden handcuffs, if you will. And 2 days later, I found a doctor in Singapore. And at this point, I still have my really nice health insurance plan in Singapore. And he was a guy who would order any test that I wanted. And what that guy did was he ordered something called a cardiac CT scan for calcium. And what came back was shocking to me. And that's what actually changed the path of my life altogether, which was that I actually was diagnosed with cardiovascular disease at the age of 30. I was lucky.
Whoa.
And I say, like, yeah, your reaction
had to be
exactly
like
the one.
I had to be like to be awakened, right? Is understatement on that one. You're like, wait, I'm 30. What the heck?
Yeah, and cardiovascular disease is the leading preventable cause of death all around the world. And so at that moment, you kind of had that wake-up call, and you're like, okay, clearly what I was doing was not the best thing for me, and so what was I doing? I was sleeping 4 to 6 hours a night. I was burning the candle at both ends. I was flying all around the world. I don't even think my body had a circadian rhythm for 10 years, and circadian rhythms are our sleep-wake cycles. And so I was clearly doing some things wrong, but the existing system just told me, like, hey, take a statin and come back to us in 10 years. And let me make this clear. Our existing system does some things incredibly well. Like, if it does fixing broken very well. If you have a broken leg, you should go to the hospital and get that treated. It does that very well. If you have, God forbid, a gunshot wound, like, you go to the hospital, it treats that very well. But I was a person who knew I had this genetic risk factor. My grandfather died of a heart attack before I even knew him. My father was obese, and I still ended up in this situation. And so I didn't quite get the answers that I wanted. And so that was that bifurcation point that set me out on this path to say, like, hey, I need to figure this out, because first, I don't want to die. And then second, like, there's other people out there that are experiencing this besides me. And so that led me to actually, believe it or not, Adam, it's funny, we're talking on your podcast, but I started my own podcast because I didn't want to pay for consults. And along the way, I was interviewing all of these experts around the world, just basically getting to ask all the questions that I wanted to. And I met Dr. Ted and Dr. Scott. They started talking about health optimization medicine and these concepts like the holobiont, and how we're really just a collection of organisms, and health is really about balancing those organisms. And it just really clicked for me. And so I don't know if I was ever really formally invited, but I kind of inserted myself into the equation. That's really when we launched Health Optimization Medicine and Practice, our nonprofit, and then soon after, Transcriptions.
Well, I need you to, you're still doing the show, by the way, right? Like the podcast. I need you to name drop that, please, so my audience.
Sure. So that podcast at that time was Decoding Superhuman.
Are you still doing that one, or do you have a different one now?
So I have a different one now. The one that we have now is called, the time of this recording, is called the Smarter Not Harder podcast. We're rebranding it in March, and it's going to be called the Health Optimization Medicine podcast. And really, what we talk about there is this framework of health optimization medicine, and how people like executives, entrepreneurs, or other practitioners can actually start to practice health in their own lives.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I was going to say, come on, man. Got podcasts around here. You better say the name of that thing. So, what is the health toolkit? So I'm looking at here. What's the health toolkit that every founder and an executive needs for high performance?
So this is something that, again, in health optimization medicine and practice, we teach other practitioners how to really approach a clinical framework. And that foundational analytics that the practitioner learns is called metabolomics. And so metabolomics is the study of your cell. And I know this is all sounding a little obtuse to people, but just follow me for a moment and I'll get there. But so we're made up of trillions of cells in our body, and each of our cells has different properties, things like detoxification, things like nutrients, hormones, and they're all connected through networks. And so what we do is we teach people how to analyze the cellular metabolites such that you can determine exactly what supplements you need, what hormones you may need, and what, if anything, you need to do about your gut. And so what does that actually look like when it comes to practical tips for somebody who's an executive, an entrepreneur who really wants to just optimize their health? What that looks like is getting 3 tests, and I recommend everybody doing this every 6 to 12 months, depending on your budget. But 3 tests. First is a metabolomics test. You can get something, there's companies out there that do this like Genova, there's also Vibrant America, there's numbers of them. And that metabolomics test, what is that? What are the results that you're going to get from ordering that metabolomics test? You're going to be told exactly what types of supplements you need, what, if any, heavy metal issues you have, and you'll get some very basic insights into your gut and to see whether or not your bacteria are balanced. And gut diversity is a huge topic. But then you also want to order that 3-day stool test. And I say, stool tests are quite popular right now, and there's a lot of people out there that are advertising them. And what do you get out of a 3-day stool test? Well, first, why order a 3-day versus a 1-day? A 1-day stool test is based on one bowel movement. Now, most people don't clear their entire small intestine in one bowel movement, so a 3-day stool test gives you a more complete picture. You get to look at your gut microbial diversity. You get to also look at whether or not there's a presence of fungus. And you also get to look at the presence of things like parasites. If you live in California or anywhere in the world right now, there's a lot of marketing towards parasite cleanses. And I get asked this all the time, like, should I do a parasite cleanse? Well, do you even have a parasite? We can test for that.
Yeah.
And then finally, the last one, and actually I'll make it 2, just because I want to add on here, because this crowd is probably a more advanced crowd. But the last 2 are a food sensitivities test. That will allow you to craft more of a personalized diet. And so this will tell you if you have sensitivities to things like, Adam, I have sensitivities to lemons. I have no clue where that came from, but I have sensitivities to them.
Yeah.
I can remove them from my diet. Yeah. I can also look at things like almonds and other nuts. Do I have sensitivities to those? And then finally, the last test is a hormone test. There's a lot of talk right now about the testosterone replacement therapy, as well as estrogen replacement therapy in perimenopausal women. Do you need those? My whole message here with this toolkit is let's test, let's not guess. And it's a fairly inexpensive toolkit that allows you to put a filter on the health world. And that filter on the health world, we all get crushed with information all day long. If you pay attention to financial markets like I do, there's millions of sources of information on financial markets. What do you believe? If you pay attention to the health world, there's hundreds of thousands of people that are really good marketers who are telling you exactly what to take at what time and saying that this is a silver bullet. Newsflash, there is no such thing as a silver bullet. That will solve all of your issues. What I'm proposing here and what we teach people in our nonprofit is let's give you the analytical base to determine what is useful for you. And so for almost less than $1,000, you can determine all of this, and it allows you to really be more precise because, frankly, you don't have the time to not be precise, right? Like, if you don't have the time, you want to know with certainty that what you are doing is good for you and not potentially causing some sort of other issues. So that's a simple toolkit that allows you to put a filter on this health world. And if you kind of add the practitioner to it, so working with a health optimization medicine practitioner, or somebody who's trained in reading these metabolites, it's that Archimedes lever that can get you from, let's say you're on the continuum and the continuum is 0 to 100. Let's say you're already healthy and you're sort of in that 80 land. Let's get you from 80 to 100 or even 120 in certain cases. And there's some tricks and tools we can use for that. Or if you're not so healthy, how do we get you to that baseline? And really this toolkit allows you to do it in the most efficient way possible.
What I like too about this is that some of the things that you're talking about, like testing for food sensitivity and other things like that, I feel like a lot of people are oftentimes working on an old playbook, like of thinking, like they don't understand how much these tests have progressed over the years, and that you can pinpoint things that can make a real difference in your life. Like you might not know that it's a food sensitivity that is causing, your pain, or that's causing you to feel a certain way or to have a certain type of fogginess. I had a friend who recently did one, and he found out a sensitivity he had, and he moved that out of his diet, and he's like, he can't believe it. And it was something really simple too that you wouldn't expect. Like you're like, I got to take that out of my diet. Like who cares? But it was something that he consistently ate, and he took it out, and it was like whole different like lifestyle. And he's like, he couldn't believe it. Like he was blown away. He's like, I wish I would have done this like 5-10 years ago, because he's always thought that that's just the way his body worked. He didn't know it was a food sensitivity. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And so I'm a big fan of this too, because I feel like if people are, in pain, or if they feel like they're off or something else, like there's possible ways outside of your traditional, take a pill that can help. Not saying that traditional medicine doesn't have its place, but there's other things that can help. So I love this.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. One of the things that I find interesting I occasionally work with clients. I don't really do it very much anymore because I have businesses to run. But what I find interesting about the population of entrepreneurs and executives is if you go get a metabolomics test, sort of 8 times out of 10, the first test, you're going to have an elevation in something called kyerinic acid. Kyerinic acid is a potential source of brain inflammation if unaddressed. The easiest way to fix that is to give somebody vitamin B6. You can take a broad spectrum vitamin B and you see in these people that reaction that you just discussed, right? Mm-hmm. It's a very simple switch. Doesn't cost very much money, but you've identified it with the test. You take the sort of supplement or intervention and you have this incredible elevation in energy or relief of brain fog that you didn't have before and you didn't think was possible.
Yeah. Great. One more question for you here today, Boomer. And I know I can talk to you all day, but I do got another one for you. So the off switch. Talk to me about the off switch and why that matters. And I don't mean for the light, and I don't mean for the light bill. Come on.
Yeah. Let's talk about that off switch. And I think it's important to just call out a few things here, right? I live in the United States. I live in Chicago, and I love the United States, but I moved here 2 years ago after living overseas for 14 years. And what I would say about other cultures is that I'm not a preacher of work-life balance. I believe in work-life integration, but there's a lot more of a semblance of having some time period to relax. And in the health world even, you see a lot of people promoting protocols to elevate energy. And I even just talked about how you can elevate energy with vitamin B6, right? But what we don't talk about enough is why the off switch will lead to elevations in energy and why we should care about rest and relaxation. You see this in even the biggest thought leaders in the space, the people that have large followings. They talk about dopamine all the time and dopamine as a source of focus. But we don't talk about how sleep contributes to focus. We don't talk about how reducing stress contributes to focus. And so when I talk about the off switch, what I'm talking about is, if you think about neurotransmitters here for a second, and neurotransmitters are just ways that your brain communicates. Dopamine is largely associated with reward and focus. You have serotonin, which is somewhat associated with mood. You have glutamate, which is our body's primary excitatory neurotransmitter. It's what gets you up and going. And I would say as a society, we're quite easy at getting up and going. But you also have the off switch, which is GABA. And so GABA is our body's primary relaxing neurotransmitter. And so when I talk to entrepreneurs, executives, what I like to talk about is, some of these guys drink alcohol. I gave it up over 4 years ago. But when you think about what you're doing to your body by not sleeping well, and the average American sleeps less than 6 hours a night, what you're doing there, and they did this study a couple of years ago, is that if you sleep 6 hours a night versus 8 hours, then that's 2 hours of sleep deprivation. It's the equivalent of drinking about 2 to 4 beers. We're talking 12-ounce beers here. If you go for a full night without sleep, and look, I was in investment banking. I know what that's like. I have a couple of businesses, and occasionally this still does happen. It's the equivalent of drinking 10 to 12-ounce beers in terms of cognitive ability. I don't know about you, Adam, but 10 to 12 beers, I'm not in college anymore. I don't even think I could handle that. And so when we get a full night's rest, what we're doing is we're turning on that switch so that we can focus, we can have energy the next day. And one of the best ways I've found to do that, and sort of my shortcut, if you will, is by activating GABA, that body's primary relaxing neurotransmitter, in a way that, for those of us who don't necessarily have the time or the patience to build the behaviors necessary to sleep better, can I just give somebody GABA so that the GABA itself will work on the neurotransmitter and help you relax more and sleep better? And so there's a couple of problems with just giving GABA. Well, GABA is a huge molecule. It doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier, meaning that it won't actually get into your brain to help you relax. And then number two is that you need something that crosses the blood-brain barrier and attaches to the right part of the GABA receptor. This gets a little bit nuanced, but you can do certain mushrooms like muscimol or agarin attach to GABA. And we feature this in our products, but it's something that attaches to GABA and allows you to relax. And what I like about it is a person who wakes up in the middle of the night and can't get back to sleep, it calms my thoughts so I'm able to get back to sleep. Or you can take a molecule that's bound to vitamin B3 and it gets into the brain as GABA and it helps you de-stress during the day. So if you're a public speaker, if you're on a podcast like me, you can take one of these and you can relax right before it. And then I can go back to being present with my friend Adam here and having a great conversation. So I just want, if anything, anybody listening to this, I want people to take away that, look, there are a bunch of neurotransmitters out there that are getting a hell of a lot of press, dopamine being one. And yes, it's great to feel on all the time. Don't get me wrong, I love to be focused. But when it comes to that off switch, building time in for rest and relaxation, or even not time, maybe some interventions like the ones I just mentioned, is going to pay dividends in terms of how much you're going to be able to do when you want to be on. So thank you for letting me have that little soapbox there, Adam, because I think it's one of the things I'm very passionate about as a person who, don't get me wrong, I love to be on. I would love to be on all the time. But what I found is if you give yourself just a little bit extra time to switch off, or a little bit extra time to meditate, to do your yoga nidra, to take something that enhances your GABA system, you're going to find such an amplification in productivity.
Yeah. Love it. This is a great message, Boomer, one that people need to hear, and I definitely want people to go check out your show so that they get this more consistently. I love it. That being said, Boomer, how do people follow up? How do they learn more about you, your businesses? How do they connect?
Yeah, so thanks again, Adam. This has been an amazing conversation, something I've been wanting to do for a long time. What I talked about here today was largely the framework of health optimization medicine. If that's of interest to you, or if you want to work with a practitioner, head over to homehope.org. There's a way that you can either sign up to be a practitioner there or find a practitioner, and we'll hook you up. We'll help you get that filter on the health world that you need. The other thing is transcriptions. Our products are, second to none when it comes to things like relaxation, stress. We even have something for focus as well. So you can head on over to transcriptions.com. And again, Adam, always a pleasure talking to you, my friend.
Oh, man, great stuff. And for everybody listening, just so you know, we're definitely going to put some links in the show notes so you can just click on the links and go check out what Boomer's up to. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. Yes, you heard me correct, daily. Each and every day we're bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way in your journey as well. So hit that subscribe or follow button. And Boomer, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Adam. It's always a pleasure. And to everybody listening, thank you for tuning in.